Hey, middle-aged musician here today. I thought I'd talk a little about slides and tone bars. So I've heard lots of different stories about how like playing slide and kind of lap steel style started out. Um, I've heard about people using a jackknife in the South to get the sound. That's probably true. Um, the In the kind of 20s, 30s, there was this Hawaiian craze, and there's this guy that played a lot of played lap steel style on guitars. Eventually, kind of the dobro style, so the Nationals. That's why you see early Nationals with like the palm trees and stuff on them, because there was this big Hawaiian phase. And I used to have a 1930s Hawaiian Teachers of Hollywood. I think I finally got it right. Weisenborn style guitar. It was a student model, that it was so popular that like the student model guitar you got was like this Weisenborn acoustic. Eventually, kind of the lap steels took over. Some of the guys from National, the Dapieri brothers, went over and helped Rickenbacker come up with the frying pan, which is kind of the first commercial electric guitar. And the later guitars, I talk about this a little bit in an episode about my 1937 Silver Hawaiian. But there's like this history where you playing flat. And the question is, well, if you have this guitar laying flat and you're playing it that way, was there a time before that where you were playing slide? Because a lot of people think about playing slide. Billy Gibbons, Duane Allman, all these guys playing slide. Robert Johnson. A lot of the early blues players playing slide. But a lot of the early blues players picked up these old dobros and stuff and played them. Now, so one thing that should be probably mentioned is a lot of the early guitars were square necks. I've had a few square necks. I have a 1930s, maybe early 40s Oahu square neck. It's out in my shop. I need to put it back together. But the neck was actually square. You could not play like a regular guitar. The strings were lifted up way high. But some were round necks. So you had square necks and round necks. And square necks, you basically had one way to play it. And if you didn't have a tone bar, which if you were living in poverty in the South, you probably didn't have a tone bar unless you figured some way to make one, you'd make do. So you might use something like a medicine bottle, which is what a lot of guys used for a long time, a jackknife, other things. So this is all my sort of pieced together history of all this. Don't cite me as a reference in your graduate paper on how the blues came together. Joking about that, but there's a lot of difference about the different styles, and then eventually there's this like divergence between playing slide, which wound up being kind of a blues thing, and playing lap steel, which was still a pop music thing. You have to remember, like the early Nationals and dobros, and they came out of popular music, so that still played in popular music, and so you had these lap steels when people are playing on an instrument to play popular music, and then eventually you wound up with more strings. It went from a 6-string to a 7 and 8 string, and then you wound up with more tunings. So then you want these double necks and triple necks. So if you go search Reverb or somewhere else, you'll see these old Fenders and Nationals and Dan Electros and all these other instruments that had 2-3 Gibsons, 2-3 necks, but they were all lap steels, multi-string, and then and I don't know exactly how Paul Bigsby fit into this. I don't know if he kind of came up with this or if he worked off of this, but you wound up with the pedal steel. So you started having these pedals that would lift, it lifts strings or depressed strings and change the pitch of them. I had a show bud pedal steel for a while. It was an intimidating instrument, so I kind of just left it alone. I might revisit it at some point, but for now I've decided to limit my focus to the relatively small pool of 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 string guitars, basses, ukuleles, banjos, mandolins, guitars in different tunings, and that. So, and lately I've been looking at lutes. I don't know. I think there maybe lutey tunes on that one, but I might get back to the pedal steel. Oh, and I do play lap steel, yeah. So I might get back to the pedal steel, but there's just a lot going on. Especially when you get past the basic ones where you have a bunch of different pedals and 3 different need levers, and they all do different things, and it's a lot going on. I'm not a very good drummer, so that's just too many things going on at once. Like, I feel like if you can play the pedal steel, you can probably play drums, vice versa. Anyway, getting back to my point. So somewhere in there in the 40s, 50s, the pedal steel emerges, and that has this kind of moves into country and popular music and that. Even early rock. I mean, Pink Floyd and Grateful Dead had their pedal steel and lap steel in their songs. Aerosmith, Ragdoll, that's on a lap steel. Black Crowes, you'll hear lap steel. So you'll hear the lap steel and then even the pedal steel later on, and you'll hear the kind of slide music. But they diverged into kind of different forms. And then I feel like somewhere in the 70s, they kind of came together a little bit. 70s and 80s, they kind of came back together, but they're played very differently. And so you have different hardware for it. So this gets back into this whole kind of esoteric nerd, talk about slides versus tone bars. So slides, we already talked about, jackknives and things like that. In a pinch, when I'm trying out something and I don't have anything, I've used like a ballpoint pen to try and figure out like, oh, how's this thing play? In both contexts, actually, that can be used kind of the same. But slides, they fit over your finger. So I've got a few slides here. I used to have one of the old Quercetin or whatever medicine bottles that I had gotten with buying some old antique stuff. And I was like, oh, this is like the thing people used. And I used that for a while as glass. And at one point I had a little piece of brass tubing that works well. They sound a little bit different. This is a modern slide. I think it's a Dunlop. Oh, it's an Ernie ball. So it's got a little rubber insert. These come in small, medium, large. You kind of fit them for what you want. It depends which finger you use. So some people use their pinky, and so one of the tricks for playing slide and lap steel is you need to understand how and when you want to mute with your left hand versus your right hand. And so these fingers will sit behind, and you can mute. You can actually bend, and if you use this, you can kind of use your pinky as a little bit of a damper. Some other people will use their pinky, and so you might want a smaller one. I've actually seen people that use their first or second finger, so they want a larger one. It depends on the size of your Vienna sausages and the size of and which one you choose to use. But this one has a little insert, and if you really wanted to, you could just pull that insert out. Here's one that I made. Piece of custom pottery that I made, fired up in a kiln. I had a glass one that I'd had for 30, 40 years maybe, and I was leaving a lesson and knocked it out of my duffel bag, and it shattered. So that's the downside with glass. There's these newer types of slides. They're like so one of the problems with a slide is if you have this on your finger, you can no longer use this for fretting. You have to kind of get by with your other octopus appendages. And so there's ones that are just like a ring, which allow you to just affect one or two strings, or some that allow you to go with a larger set. So this is one. It's one of the bigger name brands, can't think of it right now. But so you can play slide all you want, flip it around, and then you can use your finger. It's mostly comfortable. The neat thing about this is it has different plastic inserts for it. So you can adjust it for which finger you're going to put it on, what the size of your finger is, all these other things, because we're all not made the same. But that's what a slide is, right? So you're going to, and you could use a slide the same way as a tone bar. It's a little weird, trust me, because there's a lot of nuance in it. And I would even say that lap steel and pedal steel players tend to use different tone bars because the way you play is a little bit different. But playing slide, you still want to be able to fret. That's one of the big things. And whether you're in standard tuning or in open tuning, no matter what, you usually want to have access to your other fingers. Which is one of the reasons why you might be playing slide on a 6 string and you go to a pedal steel or a lap steel player and they're playing on 8 or 10 strings. And you know, pedal steel's 10 strings, they've got foot levers and knee levers and all this other stuff. It's because it allows them to do all this other stuff that you can't do with your hand. You can do slant bar and get like a 1 or 2 fret, so you can go major, minor, and do these other things. But there's a lot of other expressiveness that you can achieve by using these pedals and other things. So the slide is expressive. It sounds very vocal, but at the same time, it limits what you can do. So then let's talk about different styles of tone bars. So let's just start with a bullet style, which is a little weird place to start, but I actually saw when I have bought old lap steels, I would often get this style. But this style tone bar, so you see this is a solid piece of metal with a bullet end on it, right? This is kind of the preferred, often used, I don't say preferred, but often used with pedal steel players. And the round edge allows you to kind of roll off, so you can do these kind of like hammer-on actions and things. It's got a nice weight, so this weight comes into your advantage. This is one of the advantages using something like a tone bar versus a slide. That weight allows you to get a really good, you know, grasp on the notes you're playing. I'm not sure what the right word is. They always sound like they're not quite fretted properly, not really, they don't have the gravitas when you're using a slide. That little flimsy piece of hollow on the strings, unless you're really pressing, isn't going to sound that great. This is going to give you that. And I mean, this is like a, you know, little mini, I'm going to do my curls, little like 1 pound, you know, I don't know what it is, but it feels like it's 1 pound device. But the flip side to that is it is really heavy and it just has this shape. So it's limited in what you can do. So on the opposite side, this is called a Stevens bar. So this contours to your hand. You can hold it pretty easily. You can hold it like that. You can hold it like that. It doesn't have that rounded nose, but you can kind of come in at an angle and just hit one string. So with this, it's hard to hit a single string. If you want to sit there and just like hit a single string and not affect the other, it's a little harder to do. Partially because of the weight, partially because of the shape. This guy, because of the weight and shape, you can really kind of jump in there, jump in and out. This is a lap steel player's favorite. You have multiple, you know, places on here you can hit the strings. There's lots of things you can do. Kind of more rigid, more rounded surfaces, not rigid, but sharper rounded surfaces, and it conforms to your hand. So it's comfortable, you can play it and do a lot of stuff. Then you have things that are in between these two. I don't remember who makes this. It's actually not that heavy. It's not that it's comfortable either, so it's definitely a cheaper option. Well, I know it's a cheaper option. Like the Stevens will fit your hand like a glove. I don't care what your hand is. This is a cheaper imitation, but notice that it has the bullet nose. So there's lots of versions of this. This is a cheaper Chinese version, and I'm not saying everything from China is cheap. Just this is, I'll just say this is a cheaper version made somewhere where labor is really cheap. There might be a slight difference between, there is a slight difference between the two sides, but you can come in and you have a little bit of that bullet nose. You have, it's like a cross between the two. It isn't as comfortable. I mean, this is not comfortable to use, but this style is out there, and I'm sure there are ones that are comfortable to use. But, you know, you're going to see that style used among dobro and lap steel players. So I should also mention dobro players. You often see them with the strap, and they're sitting kind of where your lap would be if they're playing upright. That's the big difference. Dobro player and lap steel player, same thing for the most part. You might be using different tunings. So blues guys and bluegrass guys a lot of times use different tunings. Like open D or open E, for example, for a blues guy, and an open G style. One of a couple of open G style tunings for a bluegrass guy, but for all intents and purposes, they're kind of the same thing. They're playing on a 6-string lap style with that style of usually one of these styles of tone bars, but usually one that's more like the Stevens. But players' preferences differ, but you will find, in my experience, more lap steel guys that say, I'm using this style tone bar, and more, or not lap steel, more pedal steel guys that say that, and more lap steel guys that say, I'm using something like a Stevens, and dobro players, I'm using something like a Stevens bar, and I'm sure there's somebody out there playing just slide style with one of these two, but you'd have to be a little bit crazy. Most people are playing either a solid or some sort of ring style one that allows you to both fret and play slide. So anyway, this is probably not that interesting unless you just really nerd out about this. And if you really nerd out about this, I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know. But yeah, I just thought it struck me as something to talk about. I've been working on this other video about modes, so I'm just recording something to kind of scratch an itch that I've had to kind of talk about this stuff, and this one's an easier one, so the other video is not a one-day thing, so I thought I'd get something out there in the meantime. So anyway, hope it's informative. If you have any questions, let me know. Not everybody, there are people that are way into pedal steel or lap steel or playing slide, and a lot of you guys probably even know more. Probably not even. You probably know more than I do. But if you haven't really dipped your toe in that water and you had a question, let me know. Shoot me a comment and I'll get back to you. So anyway, hope this was enjoyable. Thanks. Bye.